come out to in the entire world.
Live at Red Rocks, this place is obviously epic on a myriad of levels.
We in Colorado, baby. We in Denver.
We come to Denver and make genuine connections, new partners, new agents, new managers, excellent representation, and people you can work with for the rest of your career.
I think it's so important for creators to get together because that's the future of our business. And this community really proves that we're stronger together.
Welcome to the Chinwag podcast.
Well, it's always because an audience is nice. They feed you. The energy is nice. They have a back and forth with people. Then people got up and were telling us really interesting things about themselves, and it's great.
Everything good that has ever happened in my entire career has somehow, in one way, shape, or another, come from SeriesFest. Do it again, okay? It's take two. Listen, let's do it. Yeah, let's do it right.
Richard asks me what's showing tonight.
What's going on behind me? It's SeriesFest, baby. It's really a celebration of creators. That's really what we're here to do, is celebrate creators on the verge of breaking into the industry.
And everybody I've met is not only interested in you personally and what you do creatively, but they want to share their story.
It's really about the community, it's really about the arts, it's about the people who make the films and the television shows. The artists come first here.
And we're doing a panel today about Hollywood disabilities and how to open up more opportunities around that.
It's actually been a great time. I'm excited for the party tonight, too. I'm excited for all the parties.
All you filmmakers out there, if you have a series that you want to get exposure, SeriesFest is the place to do it.
It'll be bigger than the NFL in 3 years.
It's like going to the best summer camp you always wished existed when you were a kid.
Beautiful day today, sunny and green, so we'll see you in season 10.
I am 2 thumbs up for season 10.
Mike's, hello everyone! How's everyone doing? Come on, some noise! There we go. Hi, I'm Randy Kleiner. I'm the co-founder and CEO of SeriesFest. Welcome to season 9, day 4. I feel like it's day 67. I'm like, how are we all sitting? Who was at the party last night? Oh my gosh, and you're all here. That's amazing. First of all, thank you to Denver Film. We're in their home at the C Film Center. Their staff is incredible, from the projectionists to the floor staff, the house managers. Just thank you they become part of our staff, and we're just so grateful, as well as to our volunteers. You cannot put on a festival without volunteers, and we're so grateful. Give them a hand. They need to hear you. There we go. And as well to the SeriesFest staff. If you think any of this is good, it's because of the work that they do. They're incredible. It is day 4, so if you see them, make sure to give them a little pat in the back, get them some water, keep them hydrated and going. Thank you all for being here. You are here for, first of all, we have a jam-packed day of programming, so make sure to check out. We've got a lot of incredible panels, and tonight will be capped off by our live read. It's one of our signature events. We did a script writing competition with Janelle Monáe's Wonderland, and the winning script will be showcased here tonight at a live read, directed by Black Panther's Denzel Whitaker and starring New Amsterdam's Jocko Sims with an amazing cast. So make sure to check that out tonight. Let's get to today's program, because I'm very excited to listen to this conversation. So you are here for the Art of Adaptation Beyond the Book. Is everybody here for that? Okay. I think we really wanted to do this conversation because we did it a few years ago, and it was all about kind of book to screen. And I think what's amazing is how many other IPs that can be adapted now, from whether it's from podcasts, or you're going to hear from a whole group of people that are going to talk about all different ways that IP gets adapted. And it's really, really shifted and changed, I think, especially through the pandemic too. And we're just really excited to have this conversation. So I'm going to welcome up our moderator from the Wrap, Emily Vogel.
Hi, everyone. As Randy mentioned, I'm Emily with The Wrap. I'm really excited to be moderating this conversation. When I first read the description, I thought it was kind of like one of those jokes where you're like, oh, someone from gaming, a producer, an actor, and someone from animation walk into a bar. Like, it's just such a wide range of people who are on this who are going to be part of this conversation, and I'm really excited to chat with them. So let's bring them out. We have Diana Williams, co-founder of Kinetic Energy Entertainment, Todd Lichten, head of entertainment partnerships at Roblox, Aaron Levitz, president of Wattpad Webtoon Studios, and Graham McTavish, actor, Outlander, The Witcher, House of the Dragon, and Men in Kilts. Welcome. So yeah, someone from all from different industries and areas. Now, I'm going to start. I just want everyone to kind of get to know our panelists. So we're going to start by having each person introduce themselves. And Diana, I'm going to start with you because you have been in this space for a while doing a lot of different things. So feel free to.
Nice way to say you're old.
No. No, you should check out this woman's resume. Hopefully her bio's online, but I'm like fangirling right now.
I read everything she writes. So I'm fangirling also. Hi, I'm Diana. I'm the CEO, co-founder of Kinetic Energy Entertainment. We technically, officially, finally launched our company on Monday, 5 hours before the strike. So poor timing on my part. We believe in storytelling across all platforms and all media. I've been fortunate in my career, as well as my partner Dario Desani, in that we have developed, produced, distributed on every type of media. And what we talk about is creative is a business, and we want creators to succeed. And so we look at IP development. We are also involved, I still produce, my background is in producing, and I do producing, I don't know why I do quotes. And that's because I still do film and television, but I also look at how are we building storytelling across different platforms so that what we're saying to the audience to move them into being community is allowing them to be able to find a frictionless way to enjoy the thing that they want to love.
We'll just go down the line.
Hey everybody, I'm Todd Lichten, so I'm at Roblox. I lead our entertainment partnership side. So I started as an NBC page, also years ago in New York, and that was because I loved making television shows. So my career began there. Then I went on to produce unscripted shows like Red Table Talk. I worked on the Facebook Watch side and Vice and HBO. And I think I've continued my career all the way to Roblox, where I've kind of fully moved I guess toward the technology side of storytelling. Roblox is a pretty sizable, immersive platform. We have nearly 70 million daily active users who spend upwards of 2.5 hours a day communicating, hanging out, socializing. And I think the unique thing about Roblox is people aren't just consuming content there, they're also creators, right? I think that's a core behavior that we see across our ecosystem. And when I work with brands and entertainment companies that are trying to figure out what to do on Roblox, I think that's usually the starting point, is how can you co-create with the community? And I think that tends to run across everything that we do at Roblox.
Cool. Hi everyone. I am Aaron. I'm president of Wattpad Webtoon Studios. So for those of you who don't know Wattpad and Webtoon, Wattpad is YouTube for books. Webtoon, the same thing for comics. You have an idea, you put it up there, you start growing a fandom. We have about, across both platforms, I think it's about 160, 170 million users every month coming to those platforms. So some of those stories get very, very big very, very quickly. And what the studio does is we look at those stories and we figure out if they should be film, TV, podcast, gaming. We have a publishing business, and we adapt those stories to off-platform and bring those fans new ways to explore the universes they love, and then find new fans who love those universes, bring them back to the platform. That's about it.
Hello, I'm Graham McTavish. I'm an actor. I started my professional career, 40 years ago, which is really frightening. I spent most of the early part of my career, probably the first 20 years really, just doing theatre, mainly in Scotland, doing my own play about Vincent van Gogh that we toured around the world based on the letters between him and his brother. And then I sort of crept into TV and film sort of quite late, I suppose, in most actors' careers. And now it's been 17 years since I've been on the stage, which is a bit sad for me to some degree. But since then, I've just done TV, series, movies, and seem to have sort of found myself constantly in fantasy environments where I'm either carrying a sword or riding a horse or maybe carrying a candle, wearing a cloak, something like that. Not so much sitting behind desks in suits and stuff like that. So for some reason, that seems to be where I constantly find my work in a world that doesn't exist at all. So there you go.
Amazing. And you're also adapting your show into a book.
Yes.
Yes.
Men in Kilts.
Yes.
Men in Kilts.
So that's coming too.
Hence the kilt.
We'll get into that.
It's a nice little visual cue for everybody about the kilt. Yeah, we did a show called Men in Kilts, which we're just about to have the second season come out in August of this year. But we started with a book that we wrote about Scotland, and myself and Sam Hewen met on Outlander, and we became very interested in telling the story of Scotland through a sort of camper van trip, which sounded like a really good idea at the time until you're actually driving around in a camper van all over Scotland with someone who can't drive very well. And then we did that, but we wrote the story based on our early experiences of driving around together. And my passion really was the history. And so the history features more in the book compared to the show, I suppose. That would be the best way of describing it, yeah. So.
Amazing. Now, I kind of want to start from the beginning, and I'm curious to know how you or your company even decides to adapt something. Like what about it makes you go, I want to adapt this into something even more awesome and get more eyes? And I'm going to start with you, Aaron. Is there a checklist or something that you do, and how do you go about acquiring that IP?
It's
and how
super secret, and that's the end of the question. No, so we have a really interesting process, and I always call it this weird mix of art and science that we have. So it starts with the science side. We literally have millions of creators on our platforms, millions of stories that we have to look through. So we start by listening to fandom and the data behind it, which I know I'm not going to go into a lot of ones and zeros and algorithms, but we'll pass that. But all to say is we're listening to fans to find out what to start with. And that doesn't always mean the biggest. Like when you're using data, you have to be very careful with how you use it. Obviously, the big things can just get bigger and bigger and become monolithic. So we're always using different slices of data to find maybe the biggest horror, if maybe romance is the biggest thing today. Looking for writers who come from marginalized communities, for example, may not always be the biggest thing on the platform, but we want to support those communities of our millions of creators. So we start with data, and then the art comes in. That's where we're working with we have a team of creative execs in LA, of course, but we're working with producers around the world. We produce in 10 plus languages currently. We're working with on the screen, behind the camera talent to kind of understand, okay, is this good for animation? Is it good for film, TV? Sometimes we adapt things in many different parallel paths all at once. And I think it's the interesting thing, starting with a platform, you don't have to start with a book and then go to film, and if that works, you create a series. We can actually do it backwards, forwards, start with a podcast, end with a book, and it really is about understanding what the fans are going to go to next. And so that's that weird mix of art and science we use. It's never a checklist because the world changes what they love almost on a dime sometimes. So if we listen to fandom, we know that we're going to find stories that are important to people all over the world.
Diana, is it the same for you too, and what your guys are working on?
Yeah, I mean, mine is the platform and a lot of users, a lot of users. What we look at is first, how deep and wide is the story world that they want to tell? And the other thing is that we really want people to understand that, first of all, I'm sure you guys have all heard IP, intellectual property. Something is really not IP until it becomes public in some way, whether it's a public copyright, whether it's an actual copyright, but that somebody else recognizes it. So your scripts are not IP. They're IP to be, but they are not IP yet. And that's distinctive because what we first sit down with is we're looking at the idea and we're thinking, first of all, are we as Kinetic value add to what they're trying to do? I think people add a lot of people to their teams that aren't, it's like, I'm throwing a party, are you just coming up to eat all my food, or are you bringing at least a pack of beer? So we want to first think we're value add, and then what is this story and what are the universal themes? If we have any kind of a checklist, it is what are we trying to say in the world about the human condition? And that, and that can run from, if we think about like a lot of horror films can be about racism, it can be about sexism, and Babadook is about postpartum depression. So there's many, many themes out there, and that's what brings in audience. And so we're looking at that plus what's the specificity of the creator? So what are you bringing to that story? What is that brought you to decide that you wanted to write this and think about this? And then we break that down in terms of like what our process is, does the creator have an audience? We look at where the audience is potentially for that theme, where they live, what levers there are to pull to get them to know that you even exist. And then we really talk about, well, the story that we're now leaning into with the story world, what best serves that story? I think people try to jam things into a comic book without understanding the specifics of what makes a comic book great. They try to jam things into a podcast, and it's just like, yeah, but I don't know what's going on because you're not describing it well because it's all audio. So it's like understanding the specificity and the uniqueness of every single platform, and then what it can do for the story and what the story can do for it. And we come up with that strategy, and then we launch it in that way.
Nice. Now, I'm curious, Todd, you work on so many different projects and so many different collaborations, but one of the ones I know we all talked about and that you're a fan of too is the Stranger Things one. So why Stranger Things and not another Netflix show? How do you decide on that?
Right. So since Roblox is the platform, we fortunately or unfortunately don't make these decisions, right? I think we're there to serve anyone. I think that's kind of the balance that brands have to find, right? I think it's a UGC platform, so I think they have to figure out, and we heard the word authentic, right? Which is like a word that everyone uses, but I think because there's such weight to it, like when a brand shows up in a space that's historically creator-driven, I think everyone comes in skeptical, right? It's like, what are you doing in my place? This is my playground. I've been building here. Why are you here, Netflix? And Netflix's reason was because for Stranger Things Day, they had signal, like Aaron suggests, that there was already an audience here that wanted to consume it. There were group structure. People were building out fan experiences. And if people haven't been on Roblox, you can see there's people rebuild Hawkins in 3D. They'll celebrate the Demogorgons. They'll build out their own avatar items. So it's a place where you can kind of experience and express yourself through IPs. So Netflix saw enough of that when we talked to them about what an immersive watch party could be, the idea of bringing the first episode of Stranger into Roblox and creating a 3D environment that would mirror elements, they were excited about it, and I think we were giving the fans something that they also wanted, right, that they couldn't get elsewhere. And so I think that's the calculus. It's how are we going to differentiate ourselves? How are we not going to recreate what we're already doing in other medium? There's far better places to consume video, but to be able to consume video with your friends in a space and hang out and play games, that's new and that's unique.
Now, Graham, for example, when you're now going to be releasing a book, is there a certain point you have to get to where you're like, oh, this has a certain number of fans or our show has a certain number of viewers, it's ready to adapt? Is there like a point that you get to?
Well, with the book Clanlands, no, we didn't. It wasn't driven by that. I mean, it's very interesting hearing the other panelists talk about this because I'm like some kind of dinosaur, really, in comparison. No, I am. I sort of, my career, Clanlands and Men in Kilts included, so much of it is unplanned. There isn't a strategy or a this design that we have. So Clanlands was something that I was passionately interested in writing that then led me to think, oh, this might actually make a good TV show as well. I wish I had some kind of big strategy in the back of my mind of world domination, of whatever, but I don't. And that's really, I think, common with most actors, that we're very much in the moment of things, I suppose. So we're not so forward-thinking in many ways. So the book was something that I've always wanted to write. I mean, that was my passion when I was growing up. As a teenager, I wrote adventure novels. I wrote like 3 adventure novels. Nobody ever read them, but I wrote them because I loved writing, and that's what I wanted to be. I never wanted to be an actor. I got into acting completely by accident because I was doing a comedy sketch show with my friend, and that led to more acting, and the writing went by the wayside. But then I decided I really wanted to do something, and Sam and I came up with the idea of doing Clanlands, and Men in Kilts followed that logically, I suppose, to some degree, because there was an inbuilt fan interest because of Outlander. Outlander has a very, very passionate fandom, And, you know, I mean, you could literally, I mean, this isn't to insult the fandom, but there is, you could do almost anything that is related to Outlander and people would be interested in it if you're a fan of that show. So we knew we had that interest. And that was one of the things that motivated us to make the TV show. And that was certainly one of the reasons, I'm sure, that Starz greenlit the season, you know, the first season and the subsequent season.
Now, I want to talk about choosing mediums and how you choose to do that. Like, why didn't you end up deciding to do a podcast about it or
Interesting
a VR
you should
experience?
Well, yes. I mean, originally that was the plan. We thought of doing a podcast, but neither of us really knew what a podcast was. So, I mean, I'm not saying this to sort of, really, the depth of my ignorance about so many of these things is really quite profound. So, we said, why don't we do a podcast? And then Sam's suggestion was we sat opposite each other with GoPros and filmed each other doing a podcast. And I thought, no, even I knew that was a really stupid idea. I mean, what would you do? You'd have a GoPro on your head. And we quickly came to the conclusion, no, the best thing to do would be to actually make a show. And we went off, the two of us, and we toured around Scotland for about 5 weeks. We took a skeleton crew and we filmed what we were doing. We had no script, no plan. We would just turn up. We had guests that we'd contacted. We're going to come and talk to you. And that was it. That was literally the show. And we cobbled something together and we took it to Starz as a kind of teaser. And we sat in the room, and I'd never done a pitch in my life at all, and nor had Sam. And we just expected to show it to them and everything like that. And they would just nod politely and go, very interesting, boys. You know, well, we'll get back to you. And they said, yeah, we'd like to do it in the room. And I thought, well, that's extraordinary. And we went off and yeah, it is extraordinary. Everyone tells me, oh, this is unheard of. And we went off and we made it. So I make it sound really simple, but I suppose the genesis of it was we decided to make that leap from, we're going to do this book, but actually it might be interesting to actually film it once we got rid of the GoPro idea, which was very fortunate, thank God.
Diana, same kind of question for you. And you know, your company Kinetic is based off of kinetic energy, and there's so much, like when we talked originally, you are doing so many things that are 360. You're doing all these different outlets. How do you all decide?
A lot of coffee. How do we decide? Well, we really let the stories speak. I think jamming something into something is what kills it. And so we really do let it speak. We take a long time working with the creator, working with the story, really pulling it apart, and really listening to it. I mean, the thing like I always talk about, or I can bring up, so I was at Lucasfilm for a while, and what people don't really remember is that like there's a line in, I think episode 2, where Yoda says, "Begun the Clone Wars has." And like that's a big line, and so what became from that was the show Clone Wars. And so words have meaning. So we really think about that. And so yes, we have projects that have started as podcasts. We've launched one that's starting as a card game. We're looking at ways in which we can get to, and again, allow the audience to know that we're there, that can allow us also to continue to create what we're doing and continue to develop it. So, but we do think about, like, I love VR. Like, I love every breath I take. I started ILM X Lab with a bunch of other people at Lucasfilm. I love VR. VR does not have the depth of audience right now because the headsets have not been bought as much as I would hope that they would be. So it doesn't make sense to do VR as launching a project, launching an IP, because the user base is not there. It's very expensive to make the content for it. So you are weighing out who is there, what's the cost of the content, and also the thing that most people forget is marketing. So you can make something, if you don't have some sort of a marketing budget as well, or understanding how to pull the levers of social media or get someone else to talk about it, you know, influencers, whatever it is, then it is a tree that is in a forest that is hoping that other trees start to get around it, and then everyone's like, oh my God, it's a forest. So we really do look at all portions of it to be able to build an IP.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing a lot of that same behavior on our platform. I think, the forest and the tree analogy is a good one here. I think when we're a platform that has nearly 70 million people who are coming there deliberately to find content, it doesn't mean that your experience is necessarily going to be discovered right away, but it means you have a fighting chance, right? And I think for storytellers who've, for the most part, only seen a couple different paths, very strict paths that ran through Hollywood, to know that there are other ways to tell their stories has been really eye-opening, right? I think what started, at least from an entertainment perspective, I think brands that used to only focus on Roblox from like a marketing place, right? Universal working with the team to put Minions into Adopt Me has slowly migrated to others who, a lot on the heels of kind of this Web3 gaming, I think, initiative, come to Roblox to figure out, can we incubate new IPs in this way? Still parallel pathing long-form storytelling, but Baobab's a really interesting studio. Maureen Fan runs that. She comes from the Pixar side and also has a gaming background. They just launched a great experience called Momoguru. And so they're going to be parallel pathing a bunch of other different components to this. Like the jammability of a platform like Roblox means that you're not just shooting, writing a script, and sort of backing into a year or two of development. You can stand something up in the course of months, iterate, get signal from the audience, figure out which characters they like, and then from there, continue your journey. And I think that jammability is probably the differentiator.
What about for you, Aaron?
So we have a very famous saying that I've co-opted from someone much smarter than me on my team, which is every piece of content has its own journey, which I'm sure everyone in this room has felt at one point or another. And so we try to do the same thing. We tear it apart. We spend time with it. We talk to so when I use the term creator, it's the original creators of the story on our platforms. We spend time with them. We take it out to our producing friends and say, hey, what do you think of it? But sometimes the way you think you're going to produce something and adapt something is actually not where it ends up. Sometimes you're pitching something as a TV series, and some of the webtoon series are like 500 episodes, so they just lend themselves to series. But you're pitching it, and all of a sudden someone goes, yeah, but I've got this for film. And we're like, cool, let's talk about that. So sometimes it's just finding other partners who are just as passionate about you to bring on their point of view. That's a creative process, right? That's the art and science. We can find those big stories, but sometimes someone has a great reason why we started in the wrong place. But let's take something like Lore Olympus. Lore Olympus is one of the biggest things on Webtoon. It's got 1.5 billion views on the platform. In fact, it's really funny. If you go into the bookstore, humble brag, across the street, the first book you see when you walk in is Lore Olympus. We published it with PRH. And if you look at the illustration of that, I mean, I've been reading comics and graphic novels since I was far too young. You've never seen anything like it. And we're like, we have to do this as an animation. Like, it just is something no one's ever seen before. And so we're working with the Jim Henson Company to do that, because it's all a retelling of Hades and Persephone, if the gods were alive today and had phones and were on social media. And who knows character design better than Jim Henson? And that just really lent itself to being animation. But at the same time, we can think about it as live action as well. So you have to have a starting point, because especially today, like when you go to a studio, when you go to a streamer, they're all so subdivided and siloed. It's not even just you're pitching film. It's like, this is for film of this size, and this is for film that has a lead character from this country. So you have to be pretty specific as you go in with a pitch. But I think that adaptability as you are pitching will make you find the right home for things as you go.
Right. Now, while I was, packing for SeriesFest and getting ready, my whole Instagram feed was like the Met Gala. And I started thinking about this panel because it's, you're taking this original concept or idea and you're making it your own. And I really thought that is what you all are doing too. Like, how do you honor the original story or the original concept but still make it your own? Like, Graham, are you like talking to George R. R. Martin every day? Like, how do you make it your own but still honor the fan base of the projects you're doing?
I mean, I've been involved, I guess, in an unusual number of things that have been adapted from books or a graphic novel in the case of Preacher and that sort of stuff. So, my personal view is that you have to really follow the script for an actor. That's what you have to do. And I try and park everything else as much as I can, because while you have a responsibility to the fans of those stories, and that's why a lot of people are going to be gluing themselves to the screen to watch it, you also have to make it your own. So that's what I try and do. I try not to be, when I did Outlander, I went in, it was a small thing, but when I went in for my makeup test, the woman said to me, Dougal has long hair and a ponytail, and he's clean shaven. And I looked like this. So I said, really? I said, I kind of see him as bald with a beard. And that's how we ended up doing it. And I mean, I wish it could be something more extraordinary than I'd just come off The Hobbit, where I would be spending 2.5 hours in prosthetic makeup and all the rest of it, and costume. And I just wanted to be in and out of makeup in 10 minutes. So that was what influenced that decision. So it was, the sort of selfish side to it. But really, I am always very conscious. I mean, for instance, Preacher, for AMC, when I did that, I was a huge fan of that graphic novel. Huge fan. And when I put on that costume, I did feel literally the weight of responsibility to deliver that character to the fans. And to me, I was like, you really got to not fuck this up, basically. And so I tried my best to do that. But at the same time, you have to compartmentalize as well and not have that sort of breathing down your neck all the time. Otherwise, it just seizes you up as an actor. Some people respond really well in acting to being told exactly what to do at every single point, but I don't. I like quite a lot of freedom. That comes partly, I suppose, from not having any formal training. So I'm just sort of busking constantly when but it's okay. It sort of works. But yeah, so I like that freedom. So I try and be responsible to the fans, but at the same time, honor the writing of the script and incorporate my own interpretation of all of those things at the same time. So it's a bit of a complicated process.
What about you, Aaron? How closely are you working with the studios or the creators, et cetera?
Yeah, it's a big table that gets involved in all our projects, and bigger than most because we do really listen to our fandom and our creators in a way that no one else does. I mean, to the point that before we pitch a project to even another creative partner that we may bring on, we bring them the most important scenes according to fans, the biggest comments, the most important lines. You talked about the Clone Wars, like we pick out those lines in all our books, the most important quotes, the best fan art, the best cosplay, and show them what they're about to get into, because you can't just keep the covers of the book, put an omelet inside, and call it a novel. Like, you have to have some reverence to the fandom that brought it there, because quite frankly, they're the ones who are going to start making this big. Y'all will fall in love with Lore Olympus when you see it on a screen, but our fans are the ones who are going to get it to #1 on a streamer or at a theater. So we listen to them, but there are just some things you cannot do that are written in a book on a screen. Even in animation, there are just some things that don't get told from a 2D version to a moving or 3D version very easily. But I think because we work with our fans, because we keep them kind of apprised of how we're doing things, they're excited to see what we have changed. Look, the debate will go on forever. The book was better. We get it, but that's a good debate, and that means the fans are engaged, and we are happy to keep the most important scenes. We put the Easter eggs in there that only the fans will ever get, but we know we have to adapt it, and they want to see Jim Henson's views or Roy Lee's views of Gremry which is a horror we're doing with Vertigo. They want to see the other players' views of this, and that's the layers of art that goes above the science of just listening to fans all the time. The one thing we do that is unique is we will bring our creators' voice through notes on the script. That is a touchy subject sometimes when you're working with people because they're not used to the underlying IP creators having a voice, but we bring that through our note system because they anecdotally know when Twitter blew up because they did a thing they shouldn't have done, or they love that Twitter blew up because they did a thing they shouldn't have done. And so we really have to have a lot of reverence for the fans because that's why these creators have careers that they have.
What about with you, Todd? Like, I know you guys did something cool with Ready Player One. How closely are you working with the studios and things on that?
Yeah, I think Diana and I were talking about this yesterday. I think and Aaron hit on this too. I think everyone has it's a two-way street, right? I think it's about pleasing super fans, and then it's also about sort of what can you do to bring in new audience. For us, that new audience probably is on the platform, right? I think there's this push and pull between super fans who've discovered an IP off platform in either book form or a traditional video content, and then knowing what Roblox does well, which is sort of creating these gamified, right, interactive experiences where there's an expectation that people are going to come together and do something differently than they have done with that IP. So in the case of Ready Player 2, it was working with Ernie Klein to recreate the Oasis on Roblox and sort of stage this virtual scavenger hunt that ran, and it was like a perfect way to plug in a story he was already telling at the peak of COVID. And Stranger Things, it's been about recreating Hawkins in 3D. So I think it's that space to sort of play and collaborate that people have an expectation that they're going to come find. It's not going to be a solo journey, right? You're going to be doing things with other people, and so creating a sandbox is a little bit of a different exercise from, I think, filmmakers and writers who are used to sort of delivering a very cleanly packaged go-to-market. It's a very different thought exercise.
This is a great question, especially where we're at right now, because of what has happened with Arcane on Netflix, Last of Us on HBO, and Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers movie. So what we talk a lot about at Kinetic is how do we hug our current audience with one arm and reach out with the other. And it's important, especially now as we're seeing such the rise of fandom, and fandom has really become community, and they are the drivers. Where we're at right now is a big transition period in the industry, in that the industry, bless their hearts, are hanging on by a thread because of this switch. The industry has been used to marketing to an audience, telling the audience when to be, where to be, and how to be. Now with every pop of technology, the audience has gotten more agency in terms of how they want to love the thing that they want to love. And that's a shift for the industry, because they're used to, we're just going to adapt this video game, we're going to do whatever we want to do with it. There has not been a good, whatever definition of good is, adaptation of video games, because generally speaking, they have not allowed in the creator of the video games. The reason why Last of Us has done so well, and why people are talking about it, is because Craig Mazin, number one, is a gamer. Neil Druckmann, who created Last of Us, the game, was involved in the room, and they talked about what made the game great and what are those themes that can work for television, because no matter what, it has to adapt to the medium. It cannot be a one-for-one. That was the challenge of the first Watchmen, was that they did a one-for-one, which didn't quite let in a new audience, but then only served the current audience, which is not big enough to support a marketing budget and a production budget and everything else. So it is really important, and there's also a difference between adaptation and how do you expand out your world, and that's what Arcane was. Most people don't know that Arcane comes from League of Legends, which is a big MMO, which is done by Riot Games. That's great, and it made the world feel big, and they were able to pull from the game different characters to create an amazing television show that hit hearts. It was visually stunning. It did all the things right. And then those who started to research it found the game and then came to the game. And so that's an expansion of the world. So it was not a one-to-one. It was not an adaptation of the game. And so these are ways to open up your worlds. And yes, and Last of Us is an adaptation of the game with some expansions to allow the television show to breathe. So all of these are important as we move forward in looking at how we are expressing and building and expanding out story worlds.
I want to throw it back to you, and you kind of did touch on it, but how would you clarify like a successful adaptation? Is it just bringing in people, or is there a way to look at it where like, oh, that was a successful one, that worked?
My personal definition is, how does it make people feel? So, because like and Aaron said this beautifully, like they're always going to complain. They're going to say like the original thing was better. How dare you? You ruined my childhood. That's always going to come up. There's nothing you can do about that. But if you can get a new audience who just loves the thing and they don't know the other thing, that's successful. And if you've only pissed off 25% of the original audience, well, that's successful. But it's just hard. I mean, because everybody's definition of, what is KPI? KPI, key performance indicator. That's a very big business term, but I think it needs to become more. It needs to become about like, what is the engagement? What are people really saying about it? How are they feeling? Are they talking to their friends about it? That's my definition of successful. And also like, how do we feel creatively to say what we wanted to say? So there's two sides. There's the outward expression, there's what the audience and community says about the thing, and then it's like, how do we feel? Do we feel like we showed up, we put the best thing out there, we believe, and we can stand behind it?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something. Those 25% of people who are pissed will watch every single thing you put out.
So they can be super pissed.
It does not matter. Like, all emotion is good emotion, right? And so you don't cater to them. You listen to them, but to the point you need that new audience to come in. Just to borrow something from what you had said earlier, right? Studios are used to marketing to an audience. The audience is the marketing now. That's why this term IP gets thrown around so much. What a terrible, boring term. Who came up with IP? Is it right? IP, I'm a lawyer. Okay. That's a terrible impression of a lawyer. That's why you're the actor. But the truth is, you need that audience to push you up a chart. They're going to show up. What keeps it at the top of the chart is new audience coming in. What makes it a box office hit is new audience coming in. And that's where those layers of creativity become important, where you go, okay, this is great, but there's like 45 pages of inner monologue in a row. I better add a best friend for someone to talk to because this is going to be terribly boring. The VO actors will do very well in it, though. So I think that's one of the major changes is like the currency of entertainment for so long was eyeballs watching a screen because I sold advertising and therefore that was the currency. The currency now is that engagement between fan and content. And if you have that, that is what brings a subscriber back or brings someone back to your platform every month. It brings people back to our platforms every month. And if you look at that currency as we're creating, then it really gives you an insight into how the next 100 years of IP will be created for screens and shelves everywhere.
Are you able to define success, Graham? Like, I know we were talking earlier. Is it like, yes, they got a tattoo of me, I made it, it's successful? Like, is it that?
Yes, that's the definition of success, is when they've got your face tattooed on their thigh, yes. That's what I'm always aiming for. No, I mean, I agree with everything they've said, really. It's for me, and I can only draw on the experiences that I've had with particularly The Hobbit and Outlander that have such a giant fandom, that are so passionate and involved, but it's the new viewers, the new involvement that is, for me, the definition of the success. So, I'm grateful for all of those fans that kick-started those. Well, I mean, The Hobbit had the help of Lord of the Rings, obviously, which had been somewhat successful, and so that people came and watched it anyway. But with Outlander, it was a real gamble. I mean, I'd never heard of those books. I'd never heard of them. I'm so sorry for any Outlanders. I hadn't heard of them. But that doesn't mean that they weren't fabulous. But those fans really were the bedrock of that show's success. But it wouldn't be the success it still is if it hadn't attracted all those new fans. And it's growing, it's constantly growing on that particular show. People are always coming to it new. They've never read the books. They know nothing about it. It's word of mouth. And that sort of pyramid is what you aim for. And that's my definition of success, yes.
Todd, what about for you?
Well, I mean, I think for us, I think just everything that we've already discussed, I think franchises are hard to build, right? And I think in an increasingly fragmented media landscape, I think what we often hear from the entertainment partners we work with is that kids, younger people, are not necessarily finding shows. They're finding the discoveries happening on other platforms, as Aaron indicated. It's happening through friends. It's happening through social media. It's oftentimes happening on gaming platforms, right? According to a Deloitte survey a year or two ago, for Gen Z, their primary means of media consumption is now gaming, right? And that speaks to the Super Mario Brothers success, right? An animated film that reaches $1 billion. That's a big deal. And so I think for us and all the entertainment companies, I think they're trying to create as many entry points to their stories as they possibly can, and that's where expanding worlds makes a whole lot of sense, and doing it where the audiences are, right? I think just launching an IP or a TV show and spending the time that it takes to develop it isn't necessarily going to give you the same shot as placing a couple different chips on a board across different mediums, and so that's why you're seeing these very new models that are very deliberate, right? When toy makers are making toys, they're not going to market with just the toy. They're going with an entire entertainment package. So it's just a very different way to think about storytelling. The hobby that once was like this focusing on the craft and the joy, I think has now turned into a very strong distribution strategy that runs across all these different interconnected worlds.
Can I just piggyback up two things? So what is also interesting, like with Super Mario Brothers, and you saw the headlines and Deadline, Hollywood Reporter, they all kept saying like, "Oh my God, we're so surprised! How'd that happen? Oh, it's so big," and which is bananas because it is a game that has been played by 3 generations of people. And it was visually done beautifully. It was the right partner in illumination. All those things matter, and all that that the studios wanted to do was just compare it to the 1993 film, which is really unfortunate and really dismissive, and I think horrible. The reason being is that Mario Brothers, I think, maybe Mortal Kombat, but Mario Brothers back then, 1993, was the first video game adaptation. There was no language for it. There was no support for it. They were cut out, and no one had really played the game. Had only been around, I think, for 7 years at that point. So there wasn't an audience for it, and nobody understood it. And so that's what I mean, like where we are right now. And then to Outlander, what's so fascinating about that, the industry also ignores the romance audience. The romance audience is the biggest audience out there. It is bigger than every other genre, but because of the studios, and I mean, like, I love my panelists, but like men, they are ignoring that audience, and it's a shame because that's an audience that is starved for entertainment. And so Outlander blew up because those books are huge, and that audience saw themselves represented. So our job is supposed to be making entertainment that people can find themselves in and be able to talk about and become our marketers.
So the interesting thing about romance, unfortunately, is it's actually subdivided. Outlander is adult romance. And everyone saw that. Who was a fan? Whoever clapped in the audience, I can't see you. Yep, there you go. We had the same thing with After. After, though, is romance for a younger audience, 13 to 24-year-old women who are completely ignored. And that is the hardest thing about adapting IP with huge audiences. I bring this up not because I know more than anyone about this, other than the challenge we all have with IP is you know there's an audience. It is convincing the other side who's eventually going to put it on a screen, right? Outlander, you didn't know it, but I mean, when that got greenlit, my publishing team went nuts. They're like, it's about time. They're all shaking their hands. I didn't know it either, by the way. I've read a lot of teen romance since then. I'm very fluent. But I think that is one of the challenges with IP is fandom has been disregarded and almost looked as a negative by the industry for so long. Like, I think that's the challenge.
Yeah, I'm from Star Wars. I mean, come on, let's talk about that.
But of the successful fandoms that were heard through Hollywood, there were many more that were just ignored blatantly. And it's a surprise when Outlander does well. It's not really a surprise. It's a phenomenal book series, right? After it does well, yeah, of course, Anna Todd's one of the biggest selling authors in the last 5-6 years. Like, that is the weird thing about adapting IP. And even when Iron Man came out, right? Everyone's like, Iron Man, that's like, he's not even the 7th best hero on the Avengers. What is happening here? But that is the challenge and stigma that fandom brings as we adapt IP, is that you have to sell to someone who may not know that fandom and be like, is this culturally significant even? And that's where the cosplay and the fan art and the huge communities all make what we do possible, I think. So it works for romance, but it works in horror, it works in sci-fi. There are corners of the interweb that have brought niches to mean millions and millions of people. And I think that's one of the challenges we have as IP adapters, is making sure the people on the other side understand the power of what that audience means.
I feel like even just talking to you all right now, it makes me think of, I feel like so many people, because so many projects keep getting adapted, people are like, Hollywood's running out of ideas, da-da-da, but in talking to you, it makes sense because it has all of this built-in fan base. Do you think like studios should just be adapting things? Like, because
yes.
it has
that? Sorry, did you want a longer answer? I need more shows.
I'm like, that just seems like
Well,
an easy, like it sounds like just an easy.
I don't mean to, I'll say something really quick and then pass it to my much smarter than me panelists. I think it's not that Hollywood's running out of ideas. It's that even if you look at all the writers and all the directors and all the actors, 40, 50, 60,000 people, there are millions and millions and millions of people on the interweb, that's the technical term, right now creating something. And whether it is a Reddit thread, a new universe on Roblox, whether it is a SoundCloud podcast because they couldn't figure out how to put it, like so it's just a numbers game that if you know how to listen to audiences and find those corners that are really growing, like it's just a new way to find IP. We don't have to listen to the same 40, 50,000 voices that were chosen by 10 old white dudes for 100+ years. We can now start listening to people who have great stories to tell that haven't been heard. So it's not just adapt IP. There's still great stories that are going to come out of screenwriters. They're amazing creators. They have a craft. They're the most important substrate of what we do as an industry. But now there are millions of people you can listen to every day that you just couldn't 10 years ago.
How many people I'm curious, like, do you just have a team of people who are just looking for things out there? Or is that going to be more of an, like, how do...
So I have something called a content strategy team. They are focused both on our platform and finding what is being talked about on our platform, off our platform. So sometimes we will find a story that blows up on Book Talk and be like, has anyone read this story? It's on our platforms, so I better go read that story quickly. But their expertise is reading fandom. Like, that is the ones and zeros. That's what it's like the Matrix. All their screens look like that all the time. So that's what their expertise is, but we're probably one of the only studios in the world who has that.
It sounds like one of those jobs where it's like, if you asked 10 years ago, that job didn't exist, and now if you're looking for jobs, it sounds like fun. What, anyone have anything to...
I mean, we develop IP that will hopefully become franchise. I mean, and when we go out with them, we have expressed out at the very least 2 media on them. Plus, we have our data on what the fandom potentially is, where it can go, blah, blah, blah. I mean, so I certainly hope that we are also looking at new IP and that we're looking at new ideas. You know, I can't say this, in defense of the studios, again, my quotes, in defense of the studios, when there has been the attempt to do something brand new, the audience hasn't come. And that gets hard, and so that becomes a data point for a scared exec who's like, yo, my bonus is in danger, so I can't look at something new, and that's real. And so that's what we're up against as creators when we're trying to bring something new, because for everything, everywhere, all at once, there's like 100 to 200 failures of other ones. So the way that we're trying to approach the idea of like we're creating something new is we're going to try to build it up. So you're not starting from, from the batting cage. We're trying to get this story world and this creator at least to first base so that we can help it grow and that we can just say to a studio like, yes, it's new, but here's all this other stuff. So we're just trying to give creative a fighting chance.
Graham, as an actor, is it easier to then step into a role that already has a fan base? I know you mentioned there's obviously that pressure, but is there a preference of what you would rather do?
No, I mean, no, sometimes it can be much, much worse. Yeah, I mean, people really have very preconceived ideas of how somebody should look, sound. I mean, there was this huge sort of outcry among a lot of the fans of Outlander when, for instance, the actress playing Claire didn't have whiskey-colored eyes. You know, there was this sort of outrage. You know, why couldn't you find somebody with whiskey-colored eyes? And so she's already on her back foot when she hasn't even uttered a word, just based on her eyes. You know, Sam's hair color was a constant source of debate amongst the fandom. So, I mean, you know, it's not necessarily an advantage. But just to mention briefly on the other point, I definitely see the logic in adaptation. And obviously, I've been the beneficiary of that in many ways. But I think the key thing as well, and it's maybe obvious, but it's the quality of the work that really counts. So you can adapt something poorly that has a huge fan base, but people are going to tune in for the first few episodes and then go, nah, this isn't what I wanted. And so I think concentrating, to go back to my earlier point of how you actually work on a set on something that's been adapted, you have to just do the best that you can with the script and your character and what you bring to it imaginatively, and try not to be sort of tied up by honoring the fandom, so to speak. And and that's not to disrespect that. I think it's very important, but to concentrate mostly on bringing talent to all of those jobs. So the writing, the creating of all of those franchises that I've been involved in. If any of them have been successful, it's the writers involved, all of the people that have been involved in it. And so while I applaud adaptation and I think it's important, we definitely have to really try and push for original ideas as well. That because after all of those things that are adapted came from original ideas. That was somebody with a blank sheet of paper that just went, I've got this great, like Diana. Diana came up with a great idea. You know, the time travel element was the last thing she thought of. She thought, okay, I've got this woman, she's an 18th century woman, and then she thought, actually an 18th century woman wouldn't act like this. So I need to make her a 20th century woman and have her travel back in time, which was a genius idea. And what unlocked that whole story and made it so exciting to be an audience member of. So, yeah.
So I know too, so many of our audience are creators and who are making amazing things. So what would you tell them? Like if you're looking to adapt something, like sorry, I don't know if I'm wording this right, but so much of our audience, are people, and I don't want to like discourage them. Like should they be making Reddit threads? Should they just be publishing their work? Should they be like, what should they be doing to get adapted, or if that makes sense?
To get
you all
it
are the
adapted?
experts. I'm just like a curious mind.
I mean, I'm just a fan of like, I know there's that fear of like, oh, if it gets out there, then someone's gonna steal it, and I don't have to tell you, yeah, sure. But at a certain point, you've got to get stuff out there. So, like example, so we have this project called Space Hoppers that it launched on Kickstarter on Wednesday as a card game. We're in negotiations on it as an animated series. So we have visuals of it. We're doing it as a card game because we're not backed into story. So we had to think about all this. So we're also thinking like, how are you putting something out that then doesn't back you into a corner? So how can you start to express something so that you can have the longevity of it? So we're also going to be, and we've been talking about this, we're going to be building one of our big sets in Roblox because our audience is there on Roblox. Our audience plays, our co-creator is a 12-year-old girl who is obsessed with Roblox, and I truly believe that she would kill me if we didn't put something into Roblox. So we look at that as great expressions, and nothing I'm doing it's what everyone can do. I'm not doing something fancy. I'm not Star Wars. I don't have like $1 billion to put towards things. I'm thinking what's the best use of the money that we do have with the creative that we do have with very engaged creators and just start to put it out there. That's what I did with my comic book that now, well, I guess not now, but it's going maybe to television. I don't know. But we just decided to do it on our own. I happen to have a background in comic books. The creator had a great idea. I knew how to put comic books together. I knew a lot of artists. And I'm like, well, why don't we just do it on our own? We had an offer from a big publisher, but they would have taken all rights for it. And we thought that was crazy. So we decided to do it on our own. We made the comic book ourselves. We brought ourselves to New York Comic Con. We got our own table. And we started to sell it. And we sold it online. Then we ended up on a top 10 list. So these were all things we did ourselves. And it just takes trying to find the time and just thinking about what is within my power to do with the story that I have.
I'm curious, like, is your content strategy team looking at specific platforms more like, should our filmmakers be on TikTok and trying to get out stuff all the time? Like,
So we're mostly looking at our own platforms, to be honest. Like finding something that we don't know about is very, very rare. Like if you're in the top 100,000 on either platform, we 100% know who you are. In fact, we know every top webtoon because we are more involved with the top webtoons than say we are in the top Wattpad things. So, but what I would say is no matter what your craft is, getting it out there maybe in a different form. If we're all screenwriters in this room, getting a script out there on a platform isn't really easy because audiences aren't used to it. Like, we're all used to reading a script and understanding it and visualizing it, but most people aren't. So whether you find a friend who can draw, whether you can turn it into a short story, turn it into a Reddit thread, turn it into a Roblox, like whatever you can do. The only thing I'd say is if you're worried about doing that, there are millions of people who aren't. And building your own audience, like if you go back to the stupid thing I said about currency, you're gonna create your own currency that people cannot ignore, right? It becomes a numbers-driven game in Hollywood, in Jakarta, in Paris, and everywhere you produce these days. And you have to get over that. Like that is the old way to produce, is in a corner by yourself. Creating with fans is fun. They tell you, even if you got 5 of them, they tell you what they love and don't love. You're never alone. It helped you listen to our writers. They're like, I wrote the first book for me and I wrote the next 17 in my series because the fans made me do it. And Then they try to write by themselves. They can't do it anymore. So it's an empowering thing if you are thinking about doing that. And if you're thinking about adapting something, then make sure you love the fans with it, because you can't separate a piece of IP in their fandom.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, I think that fandom is also the signal that you bring to a studio to help them understand and know that they're going to help to mitigate the risk, right? The reason that you're building isn't just, I mean, I think it's partially to iterate and partially to serve the fans, but as Aaron said, it's also, you're coming in with a block of evidence, right? These are the people who like it, and you've already done the market research for them in a lot of ways, and then they see an opportunity. It's an audience they want to reach. They can build on that.
Just add one thing. I think what is important when it comes to platforms is choose the right one. Like if you are aiming at 45 plus cop procedural, will not work on Wattpad. Like we're 13 to 35 skewing female. You know, you have to choose the right place to be out there. So jumping on TikTok because you want to sell a documentary about climate change, that might be a really great place for it. But just understand your content has a place in the universe. Understand where it does exist is maybe one of the most important things. Like, don't throw up that procedural on Roblox. I do not think Law & Order's next version will do well on it. Maybe I'm wrong. Dick Wolf's probably called you already, right? Yeah, okay.
Okay, so obviously we discussed one of the ways to, get discovered or to become adapted is by, being discovered on, a platform or something like that, or getting a built-in audience. But is there other ways? Like, are you guys looking for talent? Like, how would you recommend people in our audience get their project adapted? Or is it like step 1, step 2? Do you have any advice?
I mean, I think it takes someone else to do the thing for others to start to recreate, right? I think people have a lack of imagination. So I think through the success of Last of Us, right? I think there's now over 60 different game adaptations in production, right? With Mario. So like Hollywood isn't, I think we've all talked about, I think they're not always the most creative execs for obvious reasons. So through that, we've had an influx of licensors that are now on the platform looking for adaptations, right? So I think that's all the signal that you need. There's 2 that were just announced a couple weeks ago that are going to happen. So I think Roblox, and I'm sure all these other platforms for all the same reasons, are ripe opportunities for others to build. Whether or not that's the exact right medium for your story, that's up to you to decide.
And you can always pull things out if you have first just written a script. There are items that you can pull out to make into something else. Aaron brought up a great point about, one of the challenges of, like, say, book adaptations, that books, generally speaking, are from a first-person perspective, so it's a lot of talking in your head and talking to yourself, which is horrible for a lot of other platforms. So then you have to introduce other characters, because someone on screen talking to themselves becomes voiceover, narration, and all the things that we're told we're not supposed to do. So you have to really look at what you have and then just kind of think about, like, what can I pull out that would work as a Twitter thread, or could work, on Instagram? Can I do? We're working, like, we have like this amazing creator, Davide Bianco, who we're working with on a thing called Shifting Ties, in which he's just an idea machine. And he's putting art up, and we're bringing in short story writers who are going to create short stories with the art, and we're going to put it up on Instagram, and we're going to be then putting it out as anthologies. And so again, these are things that are in our control. Instagram is in our control. We have a great artist. We have these great short stories. We're going to be, we figured out what the legal is between everybody, who owns what, and what happens in success. That's the thing people don't talk about, is what happens in success. And then we've already are talking to a publisher for it, and what we're going to do online, and how we're going to bring it out. These are all things in our control that we don't have to. The middleman that we're dealing with is Instagram and all their craziness of their algorithm, and then what our marketing costs are. Again, everything in your control.
I know I just got a little warning. I think we're going to head to Q&A in a second. But does anyone have anything else they want to add before? No? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe they're not back with the Q&A. Okay. Okay, we'll just keep talking then. Okay, so Graham, I'm curious too. So obviously you had like the built-in fan base from Outlander when you started your Men in Kilts journey. So then would you recommend like any of our independent, because obviously so many of our audience are independent filmmakers, we're not, already attached to like a Star Wars or a Stranger Things or things like that. So would you suggest, okay, they should get like on TikTok or should build a following and then like get in a van with their friends and then document their trip?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the best person to ask about getting a TikTok following. No, I'm not. Yeah, I mean, really, truly, my motivation and interest is, the only thing I would recommend is do something or start writing something or try and adapt something that you yourself love. You are interested in it. You are passionate about it. And that will propel you so far forwards. If it's done in a kind of, well, if I do this and I add that and this, then it'll work, kind of formulaic way, I don't think that's the way forward. So, you know, my limited involvement in this kind of thing always came initially from a genuine enthusiasm on my part to do it, not really even thinking, oh, this could be successful. Just I want to do it. You know, for me, you know, the only well, not the only, but one of the great pieces of advice that Peter Jackson gave me when I was doing The Hobbit was he makes his films for him. He makes them for himself, for what he wants to go and see. And if other people happen to want to go and see it, then that's great. But don't become a slave to constantly second guessing what other people want to see. I think if you're in the creative side, I think that's important. There are other people that you can collaborate with that can worry about that. But from a creative point of view, make it your statement, your journey, the thing that interests you, and try not to get distracted by all the other stuff.
Right. I think when you can tell when someone's not being authentic, and I think authenticity really speaks through. Okay, I did get the final. It is time for the Q&A now. Do we have any questions? And I don't know if someone's like has a microphone or is monitoring it, but I see a hand there. Okay.
I have a question. We've talked a lot, it seems, about all of these great new spaces of technology and how that's leading towards, you know, adaptations coming back into film and everything. For those of us who have been on the film or the other side of it and are looking at ways that we can expand maybe our stories into the other worlds. Like I have a film that has the potential of having a game. I'm not a game person. That is not my thing. But I have a story that is based around a video game that could go the other way. How does that work in this world that's now all coming because I'm clearly older than, you know, some of the other people who are creating from the platforms this way. So now, so how do we go the other way? Is that even a thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think. I'll speak for our platform, and then we can talk about broadly. I think development on a platform like Roblox works in a similar way that development would in any other sort of medium, right? I think you, as the creative, would probably want to find someone who can execute, right? And those are engineers, those are developer teams that are often also looking for stories to tell, right? I think some people have their own creation, but other people want to team up with people who have chops in some of the narrative components. So I think that's probably where it starts if you're not going to build it yourself. But I think that the joy of working on a platform like Roblox is that you then have the tools to do those things. You can market it on the platform, and then you can you don't necessarily need to find the financing elsewhere, right? Because I think these developers, they would see value in a partnership, depending on what story you want to tell and making sure that you're reaching the right medium and the right audience that already is on a platform like this.
Basically what I was going to say. So there's lots of people who are looking to collaborate. They want an idea and have a skill set. It's about finding those people. And adaptation goes in every direction these days. You know, things start as... Look at Batman just had a really successful podcast, and we brought Batman onto the Webtoon platform to create a different form of comic. We did like a slice of life of what if all the Robins lived with Bruce Wayne, and it blew up on our platform. And so even the biggest brands are figuring out how to adapt in directions that never happened before. So it's just about finding someone who has that skill set, just like someone with a game could come to you to say, how the hell do I turn this into a film? So you're all just creative components and pillars of a broader universe you're trying to create. Just find that person.
And also what's interesting is LinkedIn has really grown in terms of game developers. So that's a great place to start to look for game developers.
Yes.
Two parts. First of all, I want to say thank you very much. My name is Patrick Hampton. I'm from Canada. I was part of actually the Last of Us team that really helped get Last of Us to Calgary, Alberta. So I saw how the whole market got shifted to actually work to shoot in Calgary. which is really a fascinating story to begin with. So thank you all. You got amazing information from top down about adaptations to expanding your world beautifully enough. But specifically, my question's for Graham. Have you ever thought about bringing a Scottish Canadian out for bringing on tour to explore Scotland because of disconnection to heritage?
What do you mean, bring a Scottish Canadian with us in the camper? Yeah. Oh. Wow, we're going to need a bigger camper van. Yeah, I mean, that's will the budget do it? Well, I'm not so much, not so much interested necessarily in bringing a third person. I think encountering people along the way is an interesting idea. And you mentioned the huge Scottish influence in Canada, and our idea for certainly a season 3 of Men in Kilts is to try and concentrate on the eastern seaboard of Canada and the United States, and going over to British Columbia, even to Montana, and possibly even Colorado, where there are actually a huge kind of Scottish community that, there's amazing kind of Native American stories that I discovered when I was working in Montana last year that I didn't know about. So I'm interested in encountering those people, but not necessarily taking them in the van. But that's just a kind of practical, slightly selfish.
Exactly what I was asking.
Right, but listen, a follow-on vehicle, perhaps, but just at a distance, but nothing too close. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Separate accommodation.
On that note, I'm getting the wrap-up sign. So thank you all. Thank you to my amazing panelists. Thank you for your questions. Have a great rest of SeriesFest.
Thank you.